Sunlight spilled across the old city street like it was trying to apologize for yesterday. The morning traffic shimmered off windscreens as cars rolled past in slow, patient lines. A bus sighed at the curb, brakes hissing softly. Somewhere down the block, an espresso machine screamed awake inside a corner cafe. Kids' laughter bounced between brick walls painted warm by early daylight. Even the shop signs, half-lit, half-faded, flickered to life like tired eyes opening to the edge of the pavement. Daniel Hayes adjusted the frayed collar of a borrowed coat as the sun caught his face. He squinted, blinking against the brightness. The coat smelled faintly of detergent and something older, dust, maybe. The shoes on his feet were scuffed to dull gray, their soles thin. He tapped one foot lightly against the concrete, feeling the vibration of the city hum. Beneath him, one who passed him glanced. Twice, and that was exactly the point. The billionaire, CEO of one of the fastest-growing construction firms in the UK, stood invisible on a busy Bristol street. Disguised as a homeless man, Daniel hadn't planned to test the world like this. IT had started with frustration. Boardrooms filled with polished words and hollow promises. Reports stacked with figures that flattened human lives into neat columns. That morning, after watching his executives dismiss the closure of another low-income housing block as market correction, something in him cracked. Quietly he walked out, no driver. No assistant. No polished shoes, just this coat. These shoes. In the open street a few yards away, Sophia Miller hurried down the pavement, sunlight glancing off her tangled brown hair as it escaped from her loose ponytail. She clutched her phone in one hand, a paper bag in the other. Inside the bag, the smell of fresh bread still breathed warmth. She was already late. Her cafe shift had started 5 minutes ago, and being late twice in 1 week wasn't an option when rent was due. She dodged around a couple arguing softly near a bike rack, murmured a quick sorry to a man checking his watch, and almost collided with Daniel. Coins spilled from his open palm, clattering across the concrete. Sorry, I didn't. Sophia bent immediately, dropping to one knee as sunlight flashed on the scattered metal. Her fingers moved fast, gathering them. I wasn't looking. Daniel stared at her. No one had knelt for him yet. Thank you, he said, keeping his voice raspy as he'd practiced. Didn't mean to be in the way. Sophia looked up at him. Not with pity, not with fear, just normal, as if he belonged on this pavement as much as anyone else. No worries, she said. It's busy this time of day. She placed the coins carefully back into his hand, one by one. Their fingers brushed briefly. He noticed how her hand trembled faintly, not fear. Cold, maybe. Or exhaustion. Traffic rolled. A distant siren wailed and faded. The morning kept moving. She stood quickly. Take care, yeah? And just like that, she was gone. Daniel exhaled slowly. That small moment hit harder than any hostile boardroom ever had. He took a few uncertain steps forward, past the cafe window where steam fogged the glass. Inside, the espresso machine hissed again. A barista laughed. A couple leaned close over coffee in the sunlight. Life, moving. Daniel sat on a low brick ledge near the bus stop. The bench beside him was occupied by a woman scrolling through her phone, earbuds in. She never looked up. The bus hissed again, doors folding open. People climbed aboard without seeing him. Minutes passed. Then the shouting started, not far down the block. Outside a discount grocery, a stocky man in a pressed jacket stood nose to nose with an older homeless veteran. The veteran's hands were raised slightly, not in threat, but in habit. You scaring customers, the man snapped. Every day it's the same with you people. I'm just asking for spare change, the veteran said quietly, not on my shop front. He shoved the man, harder than necessary. The veteran stumbled but stayed upright. Coins spilled from his cup, rolling into the gutter. Silence rippled outward. The city sound dipped, that sharp, strange quiet after a harsh statement. Daniel's hands tightened in his coat sleeves. People watched. No1 moved. The shop manager turned back inside as if nothing had happened. Sophia emerged from the cafe at that exact moment. Apron tied, hair slightly neater. She froze when she saw the older man bent on the pavement. Without hesitation, she crossed the street. Her footsteps on concrete were fast, purposeful. Hey, she said, calm but firm. That wasn't necessary. The shop manager turned, surprised. Mind your business. She knelt beside the veteran, helping him gather his coins. Sunlight caught the silver as it rolled back into his cup. He wasn't bothering anyone, she said. You embarrassed yourself more than him. People stared now. The manager's face reddened. You don't know what it's like. They scare customers away. I've got a business to run. Sophia looked up at him, steady. Then run it like a human being. The crowd didn't clap. No one filmed. But the silence pressed heavy. The manager scoffed and walked away. Sophia helped the veteran to his feet. You okay? He nodded slowly. Didn't have to do that, love? Yeah, she said softly. I did. She handed him a sandwich from her bag. Eat something warm. He took it with shaking hands. Daniel had stood without realizing it. He watched her walk back across the street, sunlight flaring briefly behind her as she reached the cafe door. For the first time in a long while, his chest felt tight, not with guilt, with something like awe. Later, midday light poured harder over the street. The rhythms changed. The lunch rush swelled. Buskers tuned guitars. A faint drizzle drifted through briefly, not enough to darken anything, just enough to make the pavements shimmer. Daniel remained, testing the cafe. Sophia worked behind the counter. Her movements were quick but careful. Coffee cups clinked. Milk frothed. She smiled at customers even as fatigue pulled lightly at the edges of her eyes. Then a suited man entered. Expensive watch. Perfect shoes. He ordered in a low voice. Glanced past the counter toward the window, toward Daniel. Your friend outside's lowering the tone, he said lightly. Sophia followed his gaze. He's not bothering anyone. The man smiled without warmth. Still, people notice. Sophia's jaw tightened. Good. The man paid and left without another word. Minutes later, the cafe owner emerged from the back, wiping his hands. Sophia. She stiffened. Yes. You can't encourage that, he murmured. Customers complain. He didn't do anything, she said. He sighed. Just be careful. She nodded, but uneasily. Late afternoon slid in gently. The shadows stayed soft. The city's brightness dulled to gold. Daniel rose slowly from the ledge and crossed toward the cafe. Inside, the air was warm and buzzing. He stepped up in line. A couple ahead of him whispered. Someone behind him breathed impatience. When he reached the counter, Sophia looked up and recognized him immediately. A flicker passed across her face. Not alarm, not irritation, recognition. Hey, she said quietly. He cleared his throat. Could I get a tea? She glanced toward the owner in the back, lowered her voice. You can't stay inside long. I'll drink it fast, he said. She poured the tea with practiced hands. When she passed it over, her fingertips lingered just long enough to be human. It's on me, she said. Daniel hesitated. You shouldn't. She met his eyes. I want to. The silence between them was soft. Then, from behind them, that's enough. The cafe owner stood at the doorway, the light from outside framing him sharply. You can't sit here, he said to Daniel. You're upsetting people. Daniel didn't move. Sophia turned, heartbeat echoing in her ears. He's just buying tea. The owner lowered his voice. I warned you. Daniel slowly stood. Around them, cutlery stilled. The espresso machine fell quiet. Sunlight glowed through the front window. Daniel looked at Sophia. She looked back and made her decision. Then I'm upsetting people too, she said. The owner stared. Sophia, I finished my shift, she said evenly. Then I'm done. The room held its breath. Outside, the daylight waited. The late afternoon sun crept through the cafe windows in pale gold bands, striping the floor with light. Every dust mote floating in the air felt suddenly visible, like the world had turned the brightness up just enough to make silence loud. The cafe owner swallowed once. You don't mean that. Sophia untied her apron slowly. The soft sound of fabric sliding against fabric carried farther than it should have. I do. Daniel stood frozen at her side, the untouched tea warm in his hand. You can't quit over this, the owner said. You need the job. So do you, she replied gently. And I won't work somewhere that decides who gets dignity based on how they look. The owner looked at the customers. Someone shifted awkwardly in their seat. A woman at the window stared into her coffee. No one spoke. The owner exhaled sharply. Go. Sophia placed the apron on the counter. Her fingers trembled just slightly in the sunlight. She stepped around the counter and walked out. Daniel followed her into the bright street. Outside, the city noise rushed back in. Traffic, distant sirens. A street performer strumming a guitar. The warmth of the sun hit their faces. Sophia stopped near the cafe entrance. Her shoulders lifted as she took in a steady breath. "Well," she said. "That was dramatic." Daniel let out a soft, surprised laugh. "You didn't have to do that." She shrugged, eyes squinting toward the sky. "Guess I did." They stood there for a moment, unsure of each other. Then, "You hungry?" she asked that he blinked. "I've had worse days." She half smiled. "I've got leftover soup from yesterday. Community kitchen a few blocks down serves lunch." He nodded. They walked together. Footsteps on concrete. Sunlight glancing off shop windows. Reflections of themselves passing in rippled glass. The community center courtyard. Picnic tables sat beneath thin trees, just beginning to leaf. The light was even and honest. No hiding here. They received bowls of soup and bread. Sophia talked easily to the volunteers. Daniel slipped into line like he belonged there. They sat opposite each other at a wooden table, steam curled upward between them. "What's your name?" she asked. "Daniel." "I'm Sophia." They ate quietly for a few moments. The soup was simple, warm, real. "You don't look like most people sleeping rough," she said gently. He hesitated. "That obvious?" She tilted her head. "You still stand like you're used to room." He almost smiled. Across the courtyard, a man in a blazer argued loudly into his phone. "I don't care how it looks. Move the people. The investors are coming." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Developers," Sophia muttered. He glanced at her. "You've seen it before. Too many times." Their eyes met. Something unspoken passed between them. Later, they walked again, past the bus stop at noon, where people clustered in bright impatience. A light drizzle returned, tapping softly against the pavement before fading almost immediately. Sunlight remained. Daniel watched how Sophia moved through the world, how she greeted the vendor who sold fruit, how she paused to help a child tie a shoe, how she listened at a crosswalk. She stopped suddenly. "Wait." An older woman struggled with her bag on the other side. Sophia crossed to help her without thinking. Daniel stood alone in the bright street. For the first time in his life, he felt genuinely small. The days passed like that. Daniel stayed. They spoke more. About her studies she'd postponed. About her younger brother in foster care. About moving too often. About learning to stand even when your knees still shook. She never asked how he'd ended up on the street. He never volunteered. Then the notice appeared. Bright yellow paper taped to the community center doors. "Redevelopment notice, property to be vacated in 14 days." The courtyard buzzed with disbelief. Volunteers whispered. The soup line moved slower, heavier. Sophia read the notice, her face draining of color. "This place is everything for some of these people," she whispered. Daniel felt the ground tilt beneath him. Inside, the director of the center gathered everyone in the sunlit hallway. The space echoed brightly. Too brightly. "They sold the land," she said. "Private buyer. We're trying to negotiate time." "Who?" Someone called. She shook her head. "Shell company." Daniel's stomach turned. That evening, Sophia sat alone on the curb outside the darkened cafe. The sky still held a soft blue. Daniel approached. She didn't look up. "Funny, isn't it? How fast things disappear?" he asked quietly. She nodded. Silence lay warm between them. Finally, she laughed bitterly. "You know what's cruel? The sun doesn't care. It just keeps shining." He sat beside her. The next morning, a small group gathered in protest outside the center. Handwritten signs. Soft chants. Hopeful but thin. Sophia stood at the front. Across the street, black cars arrived. Daniel recognized the security detail instantly. His company. Executives stepped out. Cameras appeared. Sophia locked eyes with Daniel in confusion. That moment, sunlight flaring between them. Protest signs raised, dust floating in the air, became the pivot. Daniel stepped forward, toward his own people, toward the truth he could no longer avoid. Morning settled gently after the protest. Like a held breath finally released, Sophia sat alone on a park bench across from the community center. Sunlight drifting through bare branches and painting slow-moving shadows across her knees. The noise from yesterday had faded into the regular hush of traffic and birdsong. The protest signs leaned forgotten against a low fence. Daniel hadn't returned. She told herself she wasn't disappointed. People disappeared all the time. Still, her chest felt strangely hollow. Across the street, The center doors remained locked. Hours passed. Then the black cars returned. She stood. This time, cameras weren't rushing forward. Executives weren't spilling out with phones pressed to ears. Only one man stepped from the central vehicle, Daniel, but not in a borrowed coat. His suit was simple, expensive in the way that didn't beg to be noticed. The light touched the edges of it cleanly. He walked without urgency now. Sophia didn't move that he crossed the street slowly. Each step seemed weighted with a question. When he stopped in front of her, the sunlight framed his face differently than before, not harsh, not hidden, honest. "I owe you the truth," he said. Her expression stayed guarded. "I already guessed you weren't just passing through life." A faint, sad smile. "I'm the CEO of Hayes Development." The words fell without drama. Sophia inhaled sharply, slowly. The city hummed around them. "They're selling the land to you," she said. "They were," he replied. Her hands tightened on the bench. "So this was an experiment to see what it's like?" "No," he said softly. "It was an escape that turned into a reckoning." Silence stretched that he went on. "The shell company belongs to my board. They thought I didn't need to know the details. I was living the consequences instead." Sophia stood. Her voice was steady but thin. "So what now?" Daniel gestured toward the building. The doors opened. Volunteers stepped out first. Confused, then hopeful, the director appeared last. "We're not closing," she said, voice trembling. "The land's been transferred. Endowment funded. Permanently." The courtyard erupted, not with shouting, but with something quieter and somehow louder. Relief. Hands to faces. A man laughed softly in disbelief. Sophia stared. Daniel stood beside her. "Close now. Not above. Not below. You stood up when it cost you something," he said. "So I finally did too." Her eyes burned with unshed tears. She wiped at them quickly in the daylight. The weeks that followed unfolded gently. Repair crews arrived, not to demolish, but to restore. Fresh paint, open windows, sound of hammers echoing lightly through bright hallways. Daniel didn't disappear into black cars anymore. He walked through the center daily, ate at the tables, listened. Sophia returned as a volunteer at first, then as coordinator. They didn't rush anything between them. Sometimes they sat in the courtyard in companionable silence. Sunlight shifting, laughter returning to familiar places. One afternoon, Sophia walked into the old cafe, reopened under new ownership. Light spilled across fresh tables. The espresso machine hissed again. Daniel waited at the window. She sat across from him. "This place feels different," she said. "It is," he replied. They shared a quiet smile, reflected in the glass. Months later, as daylight softened into evening, Sophia closed the center doors. Daniel waited nearby. A streetlight flickered on as the sun faded. She locked the door, turned, found his hand waiting. She slipped hers into it, not as a rescue. As a choice. Moral, true wealth isn't measured in pounds or dollars, but in the lives we lift as we rise.